Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, USC, UCLA. This is the reason that I fell in love with the sport of college football, games like this, these true rivalry games where, look, it don't matter what the record is for USC or what the record is for UCLA coming into this football game. This game matters a lot for both of these programs, for both of these fan bases. And I think there's some really intriguing storylines for both of these programs heading into this matchup. You look at USC not only on Saturday, a massive win against Nebraska with Jayden getting his first career start in a USC uniform. And then 24 hours later, he ended up landing a 5-star commitment in the 2025 class at the quarterback position. It's been a tough last couple of weeks for USC. There's no doubt about that. But over the last 48 hours, like there's just been some life that has been breathed into this USC program. Then you look on the flip side and say, yeah, really disappointing loss for UCLA Friday night on the road against Washington, a game that they very well could have won and arguably should have won. My take on UCLA is DeShaun Foster is doing a phenomenal job with this program. I think he took over a program that was in a really tricky spot where Chip Kelly left them. I don't think the roster from a talent standpoint is quite where it needs to be. But DeShaun Foster is getting to work. And I think most importantly, this UCLA team has gotten better over the course of 2024 and, playing some really good football heading into this matchup. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. This one's going to be fun. I know it's going to get hot in the comment section. I wouldn't want to have it any other way. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with this USC offense that, is different with Jayden Maiava at the helm. And I think the thing that stands out to me first before we even start breaking into some matchups, Washington in the second half went to their true freshman quarterback, Namon Williams, who's a little bit more, not more. He's a dual threat quarterback that has some really, really good athleticism after Will Rogers got benched in that second half. UCLA struggled massively with this dynamic, mobile, dual threat quarterback. Well, that's kind of what Jayden brings for this USC offense. So the number one storyline for me is how does UCLA adjust on defense dealing with a quarterback like Jayden that can create very similar to what Damon Williams can. I think the second note to have when you look into this USC offense is with Jayden at the helm, it's a little bit more of a run-centered offense, which I think is music to a lot of USC fans' ears. We've been banging the table for the last really 2 months for USC to lean into this rushing attack. It's right now as we sit, I bet a lot of people didn't have this on their bingo card. In terms of yards per carry, this USC offense is top 10 in the country, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. And with Jayden coming in and taking over the offense, I give Lincoln Riley a lot of credit for, hey, Jayden adds another dimension in terms of how we can run the football. We're going to lean into it. And you saw USC almost a 50-50 run-pass split in that football game against Nebraska, ran the football really successfully against a very good Nebraska front seven. That was a big takeaway for me. Like you're seeing differences in terms of how this USC's offense is operating with Jayden at the quarterback spot. You saw some read options. You saw kind of that classic counter Lincoln Riley likes to run. You even saw a speed option that you couldn't dream of running with Miller Moss at quarterback. I think that this is going to be a really interesting matchup because you look at UCLA and say that's probably the strength of this UCLA team. What they do in the front seven, what they do stopping the run, only allowing 3.3 yards per carry. That's top 15 in the country. Exceptional linebacker play. I think guys like Carson, guys like Cam Medrano, even Olu coming off the edge and kind of mixing it into off-ball sets, that's about as good of a linebacker room as you're going to see in the Big Ten. And so I think there's going to be a really, really fun battle in terms of, hey, USC made it very clear that they want to run the football, and UCLA is very good at stopping the run. Like who wins that matchup, certainly worth noting. I think secondly, for USC, I would like to see, a little bit more play action with how much USC ran the football against Nebraska and how successful they were at doing so. They only went to play action 9 times. On those 9 dropbacks, Jayden Maiava was 6 of 9 for a $124 and 2 touchdowns. Like and this is something that I don't think Lincoln Riley's often used to kind of doing because This is normally a pass-centered offense. You saw a little bit of a switch in terms of, hey, we're going to run the football to set up our passing attack. We're going to kind of work our passing attack around how good we are at running the football, and I thought it really played out quite well for USC on the offensive side of the football. And I think kind of key storylines here that I'm looking at with this matchup. USC's got to stay on schedule. This is a UCLA team that, on first and second down can get some penetration, create some of those negative plays. You want to keep Jayden outside of those second and third and long situations because that's pretty clearly where he's still developing as a quarterback. We saw when he's in those second and third and longs and it's obvious passing situations, sometimes tries to make too much happen and puts the ball in harm's way. If you're UCLA, you want to try to get Jayden into some of those situations and then capitalize on him putting the ball in harm's way. I think USC fans would be the first to admit Nebraska had a lot of opportunities to create some turnovers that they didn't capitalize on. And so if you're UCLA in this football game, you want to try to capitalize on some of those turnover-worthy plays. And I think the second matchup, yards after the catch, UCLA is doing a really good job not letting teams push it vertically down the field, but they're going to give you some of the stuff underneath. They allow a 66% completion percentage, which is 116th on defense. They only allow 7.5 yards per pass, which is top 60, which is kind of telling us, hey, we're not going to let you beat us deep, but we're going to give you some of that stuff underneath. I think how that could work out for USC is, hey, we got guys like Zachariah Branch, who hasn't looked great to start 2024, probably had his best football game of the season against Nebraska, kind of found that juice that we've been kind of longing for since his true freshman year. If USC gets some of that easy stuff, can they create explosive plays with yards after the catch? We all know Lincoln Riley's really, really good at kind of dialing some of those plays up in terms of how can we get the football to our playmakers in space. That seemingly is another really big matchup in terms of, hey, UCLA is probably going to give you some of that stuff. They've been pretty good at coming up and tackling. Can USC make it happen yards after the catch? Now, you flip the sides, I think the biggest storyline here, and one of the more underrated storylines for USC has been this defense has been pretty damn good. I know it's a 5-5 record, 3-5 in conference play. That's not the standard for USC. Take a look at the numbers for the defense, 22 points per game allowed. That's top 35 in the country. This has been a massive overhaul on the defensive side of the football. And I don't know if the talent's necessarily there yet, specifically in that front seven on the defensive line. They're not rushing the passer all that good, but you can tell they're tackling better in space. They're playing more disciplined football. Denton Lynn, from a schematic standpoint, I thought had his best game of the season against Nebraska. I think this USC defense it's becoming tougher. It's not as Swiss cheese like you might say with Alex Grinch, where it seems so easy for offenses to do what they want it to do. Now, the big storyline in this football game is this UCLA offense is kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde situation. When they can run the football, they normally have pretty good performances on the offensive side. And over the last couple of weeks, they were running it well. Now, against Washington, they did not. And you saw that UCLA offense struggle a little bit. Ethan Garbers is a guy that I think is a very talented quarterback, but you don't want to put it all on him. You want to stay on schedule. You want to keep that rushing attack alive when they're struggling to run the football and they get in that first or second and third and long situations. One, the offensive line does not hold up all that good in pass protection. And then secondly, Ethan Garbers is not a guy that you want to ask him to put the whole team on his back and try to go be a Heisman caliber quarterback to win football games for UCLA. When they've given him a run game, you see some really good football from Ethan Garbers. When they don't, you see this UCLA offense kind of struggle a little bit. Last storyline for me is the pass rush. UCLA has struggled at times in pass protection. USC has really struggled with the pass rush. And most of their sacks and most of their disruption on defense come from bringing pressure because they just can't really get a ton of pressure with their front four. Can you get pressure with your front four? That's kind of the storyline. Now, I think the second storyline is when UCLA wants to throw the football, their two top pass catchers in terms of target share are TJ Harden out of the backfield and tight end. And so if you're USC, these linebackers and these safeties, the guys that are often responsible for tight ends and running backs, you're going to have to be really good in coverage. And that's something that at times USC has struggled with. You look at Mason Cobb or Easton Mascarenas Arnold, they're not the longest and fastest. You feel a lot more comfortable with this matchup if you had a guy like Eric Gentry suiting up for USC. Can UCLA take advantage of some of these linebackers that, probably aren't the best speed in space linebackers, probably not the best linebackers going sideline to sideline and covering tight ends up the seam and tackling running backs in the flat? That's a matchup that UCLA might be able to have some success with. And you saw Nebraska kind of get some running backs and tight ends loose this Saturday against USC as well. Those are kind of the matchups that I'm looking for. Now, coming down to the pick, I'm going to take USC. I think USC, this offense is only going to get better as Lincoln Riley continues to build the offense around Jayden. I think it's important to remind ourselves that they built a whole offense kind of around Miller Moss and to suit Miller Moss all off season long and to start 2024. There's kind of a fundamental change in terms of how you want to run your offense with Jayden at quarterback. And you saw some really good things and some really bad things on Saturday afternoon. I only think it gets better because one, Jayden, I think, is a really, really talented quarterback. But I think number two, Lincoln Riley is just going to grow in how comfortable he is calling the plays with Jayden at the quarterback position. And if UCLA struggles to run the football like they did against USC, I don't know if UCLA will be able to keep up with the USC offense. I think this is going to be a phenomenal game. I think there's a reason why the spread is inside of a touchdown. UCLA playing some really good football down the stretch, and you can tell this DeShaun Foster led team is getting better as the season goes on. Give me USC to cover the 5 points. Gonna be a really good game for the guys on the East Coast like myself. Get the coffee ready. Got to be up late on Saturday night. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.